So remember from yesterday that the slope-intercept form of a line is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So basically, we need both the slope and the y-intercept in order to write an equation of a line in this form. And remember that on a graph, our b, which is our y-intercept, is just the point where the line is going to touch the y-axis. So I want you to think about that point really quick. No matter where it is on the y-axis, the coordinate for that point will be 0, the number where that lands on the y-axis. It'll be 0, the number. So whether that number is 0, 2 or 0, -5, no matter what that number is, that number will lie, or that point will lie on the y-axis if it is 0, whatever that number happens to be. And the reason why I want you to draw your attention to that is because now, today, when you're given a coordinate and the slope, or two coordinates, you have to determine what the slope and y-intercept is. So if you actually see a coordinate with 0 in the x spot, well then you know that's your y-intercept. So it'll be a little bit quicker of a problem if you're able to notice where you have a y-intercept. And I'll point that out when we get to problems like that, just so you can kind of see where it's relating to. I also want to remind you from yesterday that when we have a line that, let me make my line a little thicker here. So when we have a line that is horizontal, that is no slope. So if it has no slope, remember slope is basically like a hill, a slant, and this no slope would be like a flat ground. So there's no slope at all. Remember, if there's no slope, that's a slope of 0. And therefore, the equation of that line is just y equals whatever number the line is going through on the y-axis. Now, also remember from yesterday that if you have a line and it's vertical, that is an undefined slope. So that's where we have the undefined slope, because it's more like a wall and you can't climb up a wall. And the equation of that line is just x equals whatever number it's going through on that x-axis. So just keep those things in mind as we go through some more problems with slope-intercept form. So you should have seen this sheet in the attachments, and notice that now it's wanting us to write an equation in slope-intercept form, but notice it's giving us a point and the slope this time. Instead of just getting the slope and the y-intercept, it's just giving us a point and the slope. So remember, slope-intercept form of a line is y equals mx plus b. So in the end, we want all of our equations, our answers, in that form. So notice, of the two things that we need in the slope-intercept form, the m and the b, they're giving us the slope. So they're giving us our m. We know our m is equal to 4. So right now, if we were going to try to write the equation in slope-intercept form, we would have this much so far. Y equals 4x, but we don't have the b. So we're still at just plus b because we don't know it. So what do we have to do? We have to use the x and the y that were given in that coordinate to find the b. So just remember that a line is made up of infinite amount of points. There's a whole bunch of points along a line. So basically they gave us one of those points. So if we know one of them, or if we really know any of them, we know an x value and a y value that'll work inside of the equation. So if we know an x value and a y value that'll work inside the equation, therefore we can use the x in place of the x, and the y in place of the y, and I'm going to bring down that 4, and the b plus b, and we can go ahead and solve for b. We can get b by itself, and then we'll know what b equals. So just doing a little bit of math here, we have 4 times -2, which is -8, and once again, if I bring down the plus b, and my equal sign, and my -3, if I bring everything down, I just have a one-step equation from that point. Because remember, we're trying to solve for b. We want to get b by itself, that way we know our b. So if we go ahead and add 8 to both sides of our equation, so here's our equal sign. So remember, that's going to define where our two sides are. So now I can get rid of those 8's, and now I just have b by itself on one side of the equal sign, and I have, if I add those together, I have 5, b equals 5. So now I know what my b equals, so b equals 5, and now you basically have the problem that you had yesterday, where now you have your slope, you have your m, and you have your b, you have your y-intercept. So now your final answer should be the equation y equals, let me go ahead and move this out of our way, y equals mx plus b, and remember that's y equals 4x plus 5, and that's our final answer. So I have some students, usually when we do this, that ask, why don't we put the y and the x in there in the end? Well, remember the slope, the point that they give us is just one of several points on the line. So we don't want to put the y and x into the equation as if it's part of the equation, because it's not the only point that's on the line. Remember in general that an equation is kind of like a machine that'll generate all the coordinates that are on the line. So we don't want to just put one of the coordinates in there as if it's the only answer, because then it will never produce the line. So basically just leave your answer with the m in there and the b in there, because that's all you need for a slope-intercept form of a line. So now I'm going to just do a few of these in this section, and then I'll do a few in the other section so you can kind of see the difference. But if you wanted to pause and try number 2 on your own and then play it to see if you did it right, that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and do number 2 now. So same thing here, we're given our slope, so we know our m equals 1/3. We need our b, but in order to get our b, we have to use the x and the y that they gave us. So remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And we know our m is 1/3. So we know m is 1/3. We have an x value we can use, which is -1, and I'm getting that right there from that x. We don't know the b. That's our purpose of solving this equation. And we have a y value of 1 that we can use. So now if we go ahead and simplify this part, so 1/3 times -1, that should be -1/3. And I'm just going to bring down everything else. Remember, you just bring down everything you haven't used. I'm going to bring down the 1. Alright, so now we're just going to solve this equation, this one-step equation, and I'm going to add 1/3 to both sides, add 1/3 to this side, and so now, don't know why that little dot's there, we're going to bring down our b, so that we have b by itself. So b equals 1 plus 1/3 is 4/3. So you can just leave it as a fraction in simplest form. And now I know my b equals 4/3, which is 4/3. So now I know my equation is y equals m, well that's 1/3, x plus our b, which is 4/3. So yes, you get 2 fractions, but that's fine. Fractions are numbers too. Don't feel like they can't be an answer. So now just to look at one where you have maybe like an undefined slope. So just bringing you back here, either an undefined slope or no slope. So remember that the equation for undefined slope is just going to be x equal to the x value, or if it has no slope or slope is 0, it's just y equals to whatever the y value is. So if you see those are actually going to be a little quicker if you realize what you have. So we have an undefined slope. So if I just draw a quick sketch, I know it's going to go up and down, and it's going to go through the point -5, 2. Well, if I just imagine where that is without making tick marks, I know negatives are this way on the x-axis and positives are up. So I know the point's up here somewhere, and it's undefined, so I know it's like a wall. Well, remember, it's just x equals whatever number it goes through on the x-axis. Well, how do you know that? Well, you know from the x value. The x value is the number it's going to go through on the x-axis. So our answer is just x equals -5. So anytime you see an undefined slope and you realize, well, that's just going to be x equal to a number, well, they give you the x value you can use. Because every coordinate on that undefined slope line will have an x value of -5. You'll have to go over -5 and up or down some value to get on that line. So, alright, the last one I'm going to do in this section is number 4. So, let's go ahead and look what we have here. So we have our m equals 5/2, and we have our coordinates. So we have y equals 5/2x plus b so far, and we have an x and a y value we can use, but if you notice, this is what I was talking about right here. If you notice, we have a 0 in our x position. So if you catch that, if you catch it, you should know, oh, that's my y-intercept right there. So technically, we know our b without even having to solve for b. We know our b is just 5. So we have y equals 5/2, or 5/2 x, plus 5. So if you catch it, it could be quick. If you don't catch it, then you're going to go through the whole process of putting the x where the x goes, the y where the y goes, which is fine. You'll get your same answer. It'll just take you a little more steps than the person who catches it. Alright, so you'll finish the problems in that section, and then on to the second section. So how is this section different? Well, this section is different because, one, it doesn't give you your m or your b. So you're going to actually have to find both. So if we are able to find our slope, our m, then it'll turn into this kind of problem, where we have our slope and then we need to get our y-intercept. So we can find our slope, because you guys learned a slope formula, I don't know, maybe in algebra or pre-algebra, maybe in 8th grade, that looked like this, and maybe it'll remind you. So it's m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if that looks familiar, then that's basically what you're going to do to find your slope. So notice what the slope formula is really quick. The slope formula is the difference between the y values and the difference between the x values. But notice order always matters. So as long as you use the, get rid of my arrows really quick, my extra marks, as long as you use the same order of the y's as you do your x's, then you'll actually get your slope. I mean, if you just understand what formulas are, it can help you get it a little bit quicker. So I'll show you basically just using the idea of what it is, and then I'll show you actually substituting the numbers in. So first things first, if we want our slope for number 9, we want to use the slope formula. But remember, the slope formula is just the difference of the y's. So basically, how far apart 3 and -5 are on a number line, and how far apart -4 and 0 are on a number line. But you have to definitely go in some type of order. So for instance, if you were going to go from -4 -5, 2, 3, well, that'd be going up the number line. And how many would it be going up the number line? It would be going up the number line 8 numbers. If I started at 5 and I went to 3, that's starting with my second coordinate. So I'd have to do the same thing with my x's. And I'm going to make those boxes so I can tell the difference. So once again, I'd start in the same order, this second coordinate to the first coordinate. How do I get from 0 to -4 on a number line? Well, I go down 4 units. So that's my slope. But of course, we're going to go ahead and simplify that because 8 divided by -4 simplifies to -2. So my m is -2. So right there, I'm able to go ahead and solve the problem just like I did in numbers 1 through 4 that we did. Now, if you don't understand how I got that, because maybe you're not understanding the whole number line thing, well then you just substitute the numbers into the equation. So I'm going to go ahead and show that too. Oops, erase that. So you can understand how you can just use the formula. So if we're using the formula, we need to label x1, y1, and we're using 1s here because that's the first coordinate. And then this one is x2, y2, that is the second coordinate. So now if we substitute it in m equals y2 minus y1, we have m equals, I'm just going to write the whole thing down here, over x2 minus x1. And I'm going to erase and replace. And I tell everyone that this is probably the best method to use, since if you run into a case where you're having to put a negative, oops, I'm going to undo that. If you're having to put a negative in the spot of y1, a lot of students think that that subtraction sign is their negative, and it's not. That subtraction sign is in the formula, so that needs to be there. If you are putting a negative in for y1, then you need to make sure it looks like you're subtracting a negative. But we'll see when we come across one of those. Alright, so now just to erase and replace, I'm going to erase y2, and whatever y2 is, if you notice, oops, erasing that too, if you notice it's -5, so I'm going to put -5 in its place, and then I'm going to erase y1, and if you notice y1 is 3, so I'm going to put 3 in its place, and then if you notice x2 is 0, so x2 is 0, so I'm going to put 0 in its place. And then lastly, x1 is -4. So here's a situation where now I'm replacing x1 with -4. So now you can tell I'm subtracting a negative here. So some students look at that and they just think, oh, that minus is already there, that's my negative. No. So now when you simplify, even if you use a calculator, you'll get -8 over +4, and that equals -2. So no matter which method you use, if you're using the method where I showed you earlier, where you're just kind of looking at the difference between the numbers on a number line, or using the formula, substituting directly in the formula, you'll still get m equals -2. Alright, now notice that's not our answer because it's asking us for the slope-intercept form of the equation. So we need an answer that looks like y equals mx plus b. But now we know our m. So now we know our m, we do not know our b. Or do we? If you're someone who catches it, if you catch it, there is an equation, there's a coordinate up here with 0 in the x spot. Remember, if 0 is in that x spot, that means that that number is our b. So if you catch it, you actually will get to your answer really quick. If you don't catch it, you'll obviously have all the steps you had in the first 4 problems. So y equals mx plus b is y equals -2x minus 5. We're not going to put plus -5 because remember that will look like you didn't know which sign to use. Now they're not always going to be that quick because you're not always going to have that b. So we'll look at some other ones. Number 10, you'll probably notice there that you have your B. So I'll leave number 10 to you all. Or actually, nah, number 10 is a good one to do. Alright, so the first thing, remember, we need to do, some of you guys are noticing right there, oh, I got my B. Yeah, you should know you got your B. So I'm going to write B over here, B equals 2. So really, we only need our M. So really, we just need to use our slope formula here. So remember to do that. You can use our slope formula. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And you can label x1, y1, x2, y2. Or you can use the whole difference between the y's is going to be on top, and the difference between the x's are going to be on the bottom. So once again, I'll show it both ways just so, you know, both of you type of people, both of you type of students can see whichever way that works for you. All right, so I don't really know what I mean by type, but whoever gets it, basically. So if I do my y's first, if I look to see how far they would be on a number line, you can start at one y value and go to the next. So to get from 2 to negative 3 on a number line. So if this was a number line and I was at positive 2 and I'm trying to get to negative 3, basically I know I have to go down. Well, I'm going to hit 0 at some point, 2 units away. I have to get down there, so that's going to be another 3 units away. So altogether, I'm moving 5 units down the number line. So I'm going negative 5. And then that's in the y direction, so I have to do the same thing in the x direction. So in the x direction, the difference between the x's, remember order matters, so if I started at the second coordinate, I got to start at the second coordinate again, and I have to go from 0 this time to negative 4. So to get on a number line from 0 down to negative 4, I have to go 4 units, but I'm going down 4 units. So that's negative 4. And now, if I simplify that, the only way it simplifies is the fact that we have a negative divided by a negative, which equals a positive 5/4. Alright, so that's my slope. I know that already. But just to show it with the slope formula, erase this. I'm going to erase this now. Erase all this mess, really. Alright. I show it with the slope formula. Remember x1, y1, x2, y2. So m equals, I like to erase and replace. Remember, I do that because those minus signs right there, a lot of students, when they just try to write it in, kind of mess that up with that minus sign. So I'm going to erase my y2, and I'm going to replace it with 0. I'm replacing it with 2. And then I'm going to erase my y1, and I'm going to replace it with a negative 3. So that would have been a situation right there where if you already did the problem and you found that you put minus 3 and not minus a negative 3, you committed that little error that I'm talking about, where students don't write the minus the negative. Alright, so now I'm erasing x2 and I'm replacing it with 0, and then I'm erasing x1 and I'm replacing it with negative 4. So there's another spot where that could have happened if you didn't erase and replace. Alright, so now if I go ahead and simplify this, put in my calculator, or do whatever I gotta do, I get 5 and then I get 4. So notice either way, your slope, you get 5/4. So if you're someone who noticed very quickly, you got that B already. So now we have y equals our m, which is 5/4, x plus b. And that's our final answer for the slope-intercept of the line. So now to do number 11 and 12, and I'm just going to stop after those two just so you can kind of see all the different variations of, you know, what you could possibly have. I don't know. Oh, actually, those are not as hard. Not necessarily hard, but not as much work because you have, if you notice, you got your B's on both of those. So really, The only one of those I'll do with you is number 12. And then I'll do one more towards the bottom instead of doing 11. Okay, so number 12, we have to get our slope. Remember, same process. We have to do our m equals our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That is definitely not a 1. Okay, so if you do the, whichever way you do it, notice the difference in the y's is just simply taking the y's and finding how far they are apart on a number line. Well, if you think about it, to get from -2 to -2, you're not going to go anywhere on a number line, so that is actually 0. And then to get from 0, your x values, if you find the difference in the x values, to get from 0 to 5, you go from 0 to get, 0 to get to 5, you'd have to go up 5 units, so +5. It really didn't matter what that difference in the x's was going to be, because if you notice, you have 0 on top, and anytime you have 0 divided by anything, I don't care what this is going to equal 0. So we know our m is equal to 0. And as I said before, I'm going to go ahead and do it with the y2 minus y1, actually substituting the values in for anyone who likes doing it that way better. So I'm going to label. If you already understand the other way, you can just forward to me past this part. Alright, so, that should be a 2. Alright, so now we know our y2. If I erase and replace, y2 is -2, and y1 is -2. And then I know my x2 is 0, and my x1 is 5. So if I do that and do my math correctly, I get 0 divided by -5, which is 0. So no matter what, my slope equals 0. So basically from there, I'm looking for my b, but if you're someone who notices, I have a 0 in the x position. And remember, anytime you have that 0 in that x position, I know that I have my b already. I already have my b, so now I can just write the equation. Now some of you guys are probably going to do y equals mx plus b, and you're going to try to leave your answer like that. But remember, our slope is 0. So a 0 slope means on the graph that I have no slope. So I have no slope. Well, actually, let's make sure our line matches the actual place of our b. Our y-intercept is -2, so I'm going to put it down here. But notice it has no slope. And remember, this is a case where you're going to have just y equal to the number of your y-intercept. And that's because when you have 0 slope, 0 times anything is 0. It doesn't matter if it's an x, a y, a p, a q, 0 times anything is 0. So if I just bring down everything else I have, I can simplify that, and that's just y equals 0 minus 2, which that's y equals -2, which makes sense with the line of the equation just equaling y equals a number, because it's y equals your y-intercept, which our y-intercept is -2. So make sure you simplify all the way. Don't just leave me hanging with y equals 0x minus 2. Simplify that. So the last one I'll do is number 13, just so we can do one from the bottom section. One thing I wanted to point out here is you see a 0 in a coordinate, but that is not your b. That is not your b, because remember, b is the y-intercept, and 0 is in the y place here. And so therefore that 4, which is in the x spot, cannot be our y-intercept. Now what it is your x-intercept, but we don't really need the x-intercept for slope-intercept form. We really do need the y-intercept. So this problem will just be a little bit more lengthy, but it's not going to be any more hard because we did problems like this already in the first section once you get that slope. So still, the first step is to get your slope. So you still have to find m. So remember, I'm just going to put the formula here to have it on the page so we can see it. It's 1. Alright, so now, however you like getting the m, whether you like using the formula or whether you like finding the difference between the y's and the difference between the x's, go ahead and do that. You can put me on pause really quick, but I'm going to do the difference in the y's. So to get from 4 to 0, I know I go down. So to get from 4 to 0, I have to go down 4 units. And to get from 1, doing my x's now, to get from 1 to 4, well, add in a little number line. Let me erase this one. To get from 1, I don't know why I put my 1 there, so undo that. To get from 1 to 4, I'd be going up 3 units, so positive 3. So I know that just simplified, or it doesn't simplify, so it's going to remain negative 4/3. That's my slope. So I know my m right now is negative 4/3. If you used the erase and replace, or basically substituting method, and for your y2, y1, and all that greatness, you should get the same answer. If you didn't, look back at your signs maybe, and make sure you did those correctly. Alright, so we have our m, we still need our b. So this isn't in a situation where we can just look up here and we have our b. We don't have our b. So we actually have to do what we did in the first set of problems, where we actually have to put in the x and the y value. So if we do that, some students are like, well, which one do I use? Use whatever coordinate looks easiest for you to use. Remember, a line has several points on it. You are given two of those points. So really you can use either one as your x and your y. What you can't do is you can't use the x value out of one coordinate and the y value out of another. You can't do that. That is an absolute no-no. You have to use the full coordinate. So make sure you decide whichever one you want to use and use it. So I'm going to just use the first one. Sometimes students are like, well, which one's better to use? It just depends. I mean, if you look at number 16, well, no, don't look at 16. If you look at number 14, let's look at 14. If you look at the coordinates and you're trying to decide which one to use, some students don't like using negatives that much, so they won't use that one, they'll use this one. You know, sometimes you won't have a choice because all the coordinates will have negatives, but whatever makes it easiest to you, you know, in your mind of which one to use. So I'm going to use the one that includes the 0 because I know, you know, 0 is really easy to work with. So I'm going to put that as my x and y. So remember, we're putting that in, y equals mx plus b. We know our m. We know our m is negative 4/3. We know a y value we can use. So the y value that we can use, that we're using, is 0. We know an x value that we can use. So our x value we're using is 4. And remember, we're solving for b, so we're just going to bring down plus b. So now if I simplify this, obviously you'll have to do a little bit of math there, use your calculator. I'll get negative 16/3. So whenever you do a whole number, just a quick tip, whenever you're multiplying a whole number by a fraction, you just really multiply the top number with the whole number, and that's it. And you leave the denominator the same. Just a tip. Alright, but I'm going to go ahead and bring down my plus b. So b kind of starts looking like a 6 to me, equals 0. So now the last step, and I'm just going to have to write over this number 15 because I'm writing kind of big. My last step there is I need to, since it's a negative 16/3, I need to add 16/3 to both sides. And now that'll cross out over here. So now 0 plus 16/3 is just 16/3. So I know my b is equal to, so I'll have 16/3 equals b. So that is my b. I can now put my answer for b. And remember, you're still not done. You have to write your answer in slope-intercept form. So y equals m, which is negative 4/3, x plus my b value, which is 16/3. Alright, so that is my final answer for that one. I just did that one since it involved some fractions. That's the reason why I picked that one. Alright, so go ahead and do the rest of the problems on the sheet and make sure you submit your answers, and make sure you show your work. Some of you guys are, putting answers and you're not showing work, or you're not showing work that matches. So make sure you do that. That's the reason why your scores are lower than perfect, if you're not showing work or if your work doesn't match your answers.